As a psychologist, you're trained to listen carefully, to sit with discomfort, to let silence speak. But one session taught me that silence can also be a warning. I've been a clinical psychologist for 15 years. People think therapy is about talking. It isn't. It's about what someone avoids saying for as long as they possibly can. Her name was Emily, late 20s, graduate student, soft voice, constant smile. She came to therapy for anxiety. At least, that's what she said. Emily was always polite, always on time, always prepared. She spoke about stress, deadlines, relationships, normal things. Too normal. Whenever I asked how she felt, she answered with what she thought. I know it's irrational. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm probably overreacting. That language matters. It tells you someone is judging themselves while they speak. After a few months, I noticed something. Every session ended the same way. I would ask, "How are you feeling right now, in this moment?" And Emily would smile and say, "I'm okay." Then she'd stand up. Relief would rush back into her face as soon as the session ended, as if therapy itself was something she needed to survive. One afternoon, I tried something different. Instead of asking questions, I stayed quiet, longer than usual. Emily shifted in her chair. She laughed nervously. "You're waiting for me to say something," she said. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just here." Silence filled the room. Her smile faded. Then, very softly, she said, "If I stop talking, will you still stay?" That question changed everything. Emily began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears falling uninterrupted. "I don't know who I am without performing," she said. "I don't know how to be a person when I'm not useful to someone." She talked about growing up too fast, about being the strong one, about never being allowed to fall apart. "I'm exhausted," she whispered, "but I don't feel like I'm allowed to rest." In that moment, therapy finally began. We slowed everything down. We worked on naming feelings without explaining them away, on allowing silence soothe it, filling it, on learning that worth don't have to be earned every day. Months later, Emily ended therapy, not because she was fixed, but because she trusted herself to take up space. At our last session, she said, "This is the first room where I didn't have to be impressive." People think psychologists heal with words. Sometimes we do, but more often, we heal by staying when someone finally stops pretending. Emily reminded me of something I now tell every new therapist. Listen closely to the quiet clients. They're usually carrying the heaviest stories. Not every cry is loud. Some of the most important ones sound like silence, definitely being allowed to exist. In therapy, people don't always come in broken. Some come in smiling. And sometimes those are the ones you worry about the most. I've been a psychologist long enough to recognize patterns. Anger, grief, fear. But happiness, especially constant happiness, is harder to read. Her name was Claire. Mid-30s, marketing executive, bright clothes, bright laugh. She booked her first session saying, "I don't really have a problem. I just want to understand myself better." That sentence can mean many things. Claire talked easily about her job, her friends, her weekend plans. Every story ended the same way. "But honestly, I'm fine." Whenever I asked about stress, she laughed. Whenever I asked about sadness, she shrugged. "I don't really go there," she said. "Life's too short." That sounds healthy. Until you hear it week after week. I started noticing small things. She never talked about rest, only productivity. She never talked about disappointment, only lessons. She described painful events like bullet points on our sum. One session, I asked gently, "When was the last time you cried?" She blinked. "I don't remember," she said, then smiled. "Is that bad?" A few sessions later, she arrived late. That had never happened before. Her smile was still there, but thinner. I didn't ask what happened. I asked, "How hard are you working to look okay right now?" The question caught her off guard. She laughed once, then stopped. "I don't know how to not be okay," she said quietly. She stared at the floor. "If I stop smiling, everything feels like it might collapse." She told me about growing up in a home where emotions were inconvenient, about being praised for being easy, for not needing much. "I learned early that sadness made people uncomfortable," she said. "So I stopped showing it. Then I stopped feeling it. At least, I thought I did." Her hands were shaking. "I'm tired," she whispered, "of holding everything together all the time." Therapy shifted after that day. We talked about disappointment, about resentment, about anger she'd never allowed herself to feel. Not to dwell, but to make space. Slowly, her smile changed. It became quieter, more honest. Months later, she came into a session without makeup. No bright colors, no performance. She sat down and said, "Today, I don't feel great." Then she smiled again. But this time, it was real. People think therapy is about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about letting something crack for the first time. Claire taught me this. A smile can be armor, and taking it off can be the bravest thing a person ever does. Not everyone who looks happy is okay. Some are just very good at surviving quietly. He never missed a session. He never cried. He never raised his voice. But every week, he watched a clock like he was counting down something I couldn't see. I've learned that not all pain announces itself. Some of it sits quietly, well-dressed, on time. His name was Robert. Early 60s, recently retired, married for 40 years. He came to therapy because his wife insisted. "She says I'm distant." He told me, "I don't feel distant. I just don't have much to say anymore. That happens often after retirement, or so people think." Robert spoke carefully about his routine, his walks, the news. Nothing emotional, nothing personal. Every session followed the same rhythm. He'd sit down, answer questions politely, and glance at the clock. Not nervously, not impatiently, precisely. At exactly the 40-minute mark, he would relax, as if something was almost over. One afternoon, I asked him about his career. He had been an engineer, highly respected, problem solver. When people needed answers, he said, "They came to me." "And now?" I asked. He shrugged. "Now everything runs without me." That sentence stayed in the room longer than he did. A few weeks later, I asked him directly, "What are you afraid would happen if you stopped watching the clock?" He smiled politely, then said, "I'm afraid I'll realize that there's nothing left I'm needed for." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, honest. That was the first time Robert spoke about loss. Not death, not illness, but relevance. About waking up with nowhere to be. About feeling invisible in his own home. About wondering if his absence would even be noticed. "I'm not sad," he said quickly. "I just feel unnecessary." His voice didn't break, but his hands clenched tightly in his lap. We stopped focusing on feelings. Instead, we talked about meaning, not productivity, not usefulness, presence. We explored who Robert was when no one needed fixing. He started volunteering twice a week, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Months later, he came into a session and didn't look at the clock, not once. At the end, he laughed softly. "I forgot where we were in time," he said. "I guess that's progress." People think therapy is about healing wounds. Sometimes it's about grieving versions of ourselves this world no longer asks for. Robert reminded me of this. Worth doesn't expire with usefulness, and time isn't always something we're running out of. Some people aren't afraid of dying. They're afraid of living without being needed. She brought a notebook to every session. Every thought, every detail, perfectly organized. But there was one thing she never wrote down, and it nearly broke her. I've worked with many clients who talk too much, and some who barely talk at all, but I'll never forget the ones who prepare. Her name was Lily, 17, high-achieving, top of her class. She came to therapy because her school counselor was concerned about her perfectionism. Lily didn't argue with that. She nodded, smiled politely, and opened her notebook. Every session followed the same pattern. She'd flip to a fresh page, date at the top, bullet points underneath. What went well, what could improve, what she planned to fix. She spoke clearly, calmly, like she was giving a presentation. When I asked how she felt, she checked her notes first. "I wrote that I was anxious," she'd say, "but I handled it." That word again and again. Handled. Lily never cried, never complained. She described panic attacks like data points, sleepless nights like scheduling problems. One day, I asked her something simple. "What happens if you don't fix something?" She paused, then wrote something down. "I don't let that happen," she said. A few weeks later, Lily came in without her notebook. She sat down and stared at her hands. "I forgot it," she said quietly. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Minutes passed. Finally, she looked up. I don't know what to say when I don't have it, she admitted. That was the first honest sentence I'd heard from her. Her voice shook. I write because if everything's on paper, it feels controlled, she said. If it's controlled, it can't fall apart. Tears welled up. I'm scared that if I stop managing myself, there won't be anything left. She took a breath. I don't know who I am when I'm not performing. The notebook wasn't organization. It was protection. We didn't take the notebook away. We changed how she used it. No lists, no fixes, just questions. What hurt today? What didn't need solving? What can wait? Slowly, Lily learned something radical. That feelings don't need conclusions. That failure isn't an emergency. That rest isn't something you earn. Months later, she brought the notebook again. But this time, she opened it and said, I didn't write anything today. I wanted to see if that was okay. It was. People think anxiety looks like chaos. Sometimes it looks like control taken too far. Lily taught me this. Some people don't need help organizing their thoughts. They need permission to stop organizing their pain. Not everything that's broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be felt without being written down. In therapy, people talk about loss all the time. They describe it. They circle around it. But one man never said the name of the person he lost until the day he finally did. Grief doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives organized, polite, contained. His name was Thomas, late 40s, accountant, recently widowed. He came to therapy 6 months after his wife passed away. I'm functioning, he told me during our first session. I just feel disconnected. That's a word I hear often. Thomas spoke calmly about paperwork, about meals he cooked for one, about learning how to sleep on one side of the bed. He never cried, never raised his voice, and he never once said his wife's name. He called her my wife, or she. Never more than that. Week after week, the pattern stayed the same. He described his days efficiently, like a report. I'm doing what needs to be done, he said. People keep asking how I am. I don't know what they want me to say. When I asked what he missed, he paused. The routine, he answered. Not her. The routine. One afternoon, I asked a small question. What was your favorite thing about her? Thomas opened his mouth then closed it. He looked down at his hands. I don't think I can answer that, he said quietly. Why not? I asked. He swallowed. Because if I say her name, it feels like admitting she's really gone. The room went still. Grief finally stepped out of the shadows. She was the one who remembered things, he said softly. Birthdays, appointments, the small details that make life feel held together. His voice trembled for the first time. And now, he continued, if I say her name, there's no one left to answer to it. Silence followed. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, her name was Anna. He covered his face. And finally he cried. We didn't rush that moment. We let the name sit in the room, unprotected, real. Over time, Thomas began to speak of Anna more freely. Not just how she died, but how she lived. Her laugh, her impatience with slow walkers, the way she drank her coffee. Grief didn't disappear, but it softened. People think healing means letting go. Sometimes it means letting someone exist again out loud. Thomas taught me something I still hold on to. Avoiding a name doesn't protect you from pain. It only postpones love being remembered. Grief doesn't end when someone dies. It ends slowly when we're finally able to say their name without disappearing ourselves.